Hi, this is Dave and welcome to the Table, and today we're going to be taking a look at the game Barony from designer Marc-Andre, and this is from the Matago Select collection. Now what this is a race game driven by area control for 2 to 4 players, in which each player is working to expand their fiefdom and rise through the ranks of nobility to be crowned the king of the game. Now we're going to be having to face different types of terrain, which are going to give us some benefits and some challenges as we are working to expand the areas that we control. Let's take a look at this game and how it's played, and I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts.
Okay, here I have Barony set up for 2 players, and the game board is made up of these modular tiles that have different types of terrain on them, and we will be using 9 of these tiles per player to set up the game board. So for 2 players we have 18 of them, and they're going to be randomly placed on the game board. So this has 2 benefits. First of all, with the number of tiles, the game is going to scale depending upon the number of players, and that is important for this, especially being an area control type game. And secondly, with the variable setup, it's going to slightly change the experience from game to game and how you're going to approach your strategies for playing. Now, these different tiles have different types of terrain, and the terrain is going to be important in this particular game because they have different values and different rules pertaining to them, which I'm going to get through when I explain the gameplay. Now, there's also a scoring track that comes with the game, and this may look a little confusing at first, but it'll all make sense when we actually start scoring. But we will be able to move not only on a diagonal, but also on a horizontal track, and we are attempting to reach this last column here to trigger the end of the game. And these are the different ranks that we will be able to progress through in our attempt to be crowned king of this area. So each player is going to receive their player pawn pieces for their color, and they will also receive a player reference guide. And this will explain all the different types of actions that we can take, which I will go over. And on the back has the family crest. At the beginning of the game, we are going to place 3 cities each onto the game board. And there are certain rules that we have to abide by. There's a specific rule for placement of the tiles and the order of how they're placed. But most importantly, we need to worry about where we can place them. First of all, we cannot place a city in the water. Nothing can actually be placed in the water. It's a permanent obstacle that we'll have to go around. However, placing a city next to water is going to give a benefit, which I'll talk about shortly. There are forested areas, which are the dark green, which we cannot build cities in them. Just the terrain is just too thick for us to have this, this big, huge area for people to live in. There are plains and there are fields, which these are the most valuable types of terrain throughout the game, and we can build there freely however we want. And then there are also mountains that we can choose to build on as well. These are the least valuable in terms of point-wise, but being able to occupy mountain areas is going to give us an advantage as well, which I will talk about when we get in the gameplay. So here we have our cities set up, and each of them have 1 knight with them. And I'm going to go over the different actions that you could take on your turn to show you how to play. So I'm going to slightly zoom in on a section of the game board so we can see how things can progress. So a player will be given the first player token, and then they will be able to do things on their turn. And each turn is going to, you will take 1 of the 6 different actions that are available to you during the game. The first action that we can choose to do is to recruit. Now, in a recruit action, we will be able to bring out additional knight pieces and place them in one of our cities. Now, we choose 1 city, and we can place 2 knights there, just like that. And so we'll be able, they're like a spawning point for our pieces. Now, this one here we can put 2, and I talked about terrain before, and if we look at this other city down here, it's next to water. I could on my turn choose to place 3 knights there. So I have an extra benefit of being able to bring out an extra knight because we have the extra resource of having water there. So if I chose to do a recruit action, I choose one city, and I'll just place these 2 knights right there, and that would be my turn. And then it would be the next player's turn, and they would choose an action as well. Another action that we can do is we can choose to move. Now, here's an interesting thing. When we choose to move, we could take 2 units and we move them 1 space. Just like that, we're moving them together. Or I can choose 2 units and I can have 1 move here and 1 move this way. And so now I'm spreading out my my forces and occupying more spaces. Now there are some other things that we can do in terms of movement, and not all of our movements would be considered hostile. For example, if this player had a knight here in this particular space, I could choose to move 1 knight into that space, and we are getting along. So eventually on my turn I can move through and nothing is going to happen. However, if I were to move 2 knights into this space, there's going to be a combat that will ensue, and this knight will be destroyed and go back to that player's reserve. Also, there are some buildings that will come into play, and I'll talk about building them. But let's say, for example, this was a village. I could choose to move 1 knight into that space. Everything is fine. However, if I move 2 knights in there, this would be destroyed as well. There is another building that's called a stronghold. However, if a stronghold is built, then nobody can move into this particular space. And the other thing is, if in terms of movement, if there are 2 pawns, whether it's 2 knights or a knight and a city occupying a space, then I would not be able to move into that. So those are your movement rules. And one other thing with movement, and I talked about terrain being important, is if I were to occupy a mountain space, I have the high ground and nobody will be able to encroach upon that space. So I could potentially leave this here and block off movement. So again, terrain is very important in this game. One of the other things that we can choose to do is, once we have our knights out on the board in various locations, I can choose to do what's called a build action. And what I would do then is I would choose as many of these different knights on the board as I want, and I would be able to convert them into either strongholds or villages. And so if I do that, I would I will remove some off the board, and these guys will go back to my reserve. And what happens is now I occupy those particular spaces, and I will take the corresponding prestige points for these different types of terrain. So for example, on the plains, I will take this one. This is worth, it's going to be worth 4 points during the game, 2 points at the end of the game if I'm still holding on to it, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then the fields are worth 5 and 3. So this is the most valuable space on the board. So we've talked about being able to convert things, and then later on, other actions that we can choose to do, as long as we're abiding by our rules, is we could, on our turn, we can choose to convert one of our villages into a city. And so let's say, for example, here we did this one. I would take it off the board, and I would place a city there. Now, if you notice on my, I am obeying all the rules here. I am at least 1 space away from another city. I'm not in water. I'm not in the forest. And by doing that, by building a city, I will score 10 points on the track. So I will move on the diagonal down here. Each time that I will build a city, I will gain 10 points. So I only have 1 more city that I could build that will put me on the bottom track. So that's one of the other actions to do. So far we've talked about a number of them already. We've talked about being able to recruit. We've talked about moving. We've talked about making the choice to convert our to do a build action. We talked about converting our city into converting one of our villages into a city. Now another thing that we can do, and this is pretty interesting, is that we can do what's called an expedition. And this requires us to sacrifice 1 of our knights. So we would have to take 2 from our reserve, which would be off the board, and then we would discard 1 from the game, would be permanently gone, and we'd be able to take our knight and we would be able to place it at any terrain space along the edge of the game board. Now this is good in a pinch if all of a sudden you're blocked off from your opponents being able to from you being able to move to be able to explore new lands and get back into the game. But it comes at a cost of getting rid of one of your knights for the rest of the game. Now, one of the other things that I want to talk about is we talked about these different prestige tokens, and as we get them, we're going to place them in front of us. And I'm just going to put a few of them here in front of me to talk about. And so there's some things that are going to pertain to that. We have this particular city, our village right here, I'm sorry. And let's say the blue player decides to come in on a move action and they choose to conquer this particular village. The village is destroyed, goes back to my reserve, and they would be able to steal from me these prestige tokens. And they can take any one they want. Now this happened to be on a field, and so most likely you're going to want to steal the most valuable ones. But I would be able to take it. So let's say, for example, that happened on a forested area. They could still take the plains one, and so that's going to have a factor on the game. And I talked about gaining these prestige tokens. Our final action that we can choose to do is we could trade them in order to elevate ourselves in rank. And so what we need to do is turn in on our turn, this is our one action, is to turn in at least 15 points worth of these to elevate ourselves in rank. So we have a 5, a 10, 14, 15, 16. So I'll trade these in, and down on the scoring track, I would move up now 15 points. So that's how that movement is going to be along the track here. And so this is going to continue over the course of the game. We're going to be expanding out our territories and building new locations and having strongholds and doing different things in order to control areas and to gain prestige points and trade them in order to score points. We're going to have to make decisions along the way as to how we're going to best make use of our turns, but in the long run we are going to be racing to trigger the end of the game and reach this particular last area. So if I didn't build another city and I kept progressing myself, I would be at 70, and whoever is the first one to go here will trigger the end of the game. Each other player will have one more turn to take one action, and at the end of the game we're going to score up some points. This is going to be the first level of points that we're going to score, and then any of these additional terrain tokens that we may have in front of us, we're going to add this silver number point to it. So for example, here at the end of the game, the red player, if all I had was this, I would have 72 points. We'd have one here and one here is 2, opposed to whatever the other players would have. That is how you play Barony.
All right, so you had a chance to see how Barony is played, and I want to talk about it really quick. First of all, let me talk about the production quality of the game, because I think it is very, very well done. Love the box cover. I like this foil embossing right on the front, and you can see if I move it around there. Just gives it a really rich feel for the game, which lends into the whole nobility aspect of this and which drives this game. And the tiles look really, really good. They have a nice thickness to them. I don't see any issues with any kind of warping. The scoreboard is nicely done, has nice spaces for all of the pieces to go on, nice artwork on there, nice artwork on the tiles. And we have really, really nicely done wooden pieces. These are chunky, and so if you look at the top view, that the cities are actually look like they're 3 different pieces put together to comprise the one. And then we have the different types of pieces. Now I did notice in my copy that the knights are a different shade of coloring than the rest of the pieces, and so I'm not sure if that's done intentionally, but they do differentiate that particular pawn from the other pieces that are in your color, so that it's easy for you to see which ones can be moved around on the game board. So I like that. You still can tell what's red and what's blue and what's green and yellow, but just they have a slight different coloration on the knight pieces. Now, there are some things that I want to talk about with the gameplay. First of all, I'm going to talk about the rule book. Here is the rule book. This page here, these 2 pages, And on the back, most of them are pictures, and that's it. So this is going to be very, very beneficial, especially in a family type environment with this game, because this is a game that can be taught very, very easily, and you're up and playing in no time. So it's not like you have to spend days prepping in order to play it. This is going to take you all of about 5 minutes to look through the rules, and you will understand what's going on. There are plenty of examples that are in there, and explains all the symbology. And then also you're going to have your player reference card in front of you, which is going to have all of the same information, just in symbol form. And so very, very simple rules, and this game is very, very easy to teach. So those are some benefits right there. Getting into the gameplay itself, it's just a very, very simple game to play. On your turn, choose one action, and that's it. Next player's turn. And so that is huge, because it's going to keep everybody's attention focused on the game, because turns go quickly and you have to pay attention to this game to see what is going on, because as things are developing, you're going to have to plan accordingly. And so I like that. So we've got very, very very simple game to play in choosing one action. Now the other thing that I like, this is an area control game. Primarily, I mean, there is a race involved to be the first one to work up through the ranks, but from the startup of the game and how this board is scaled, you can be in your opponent's face in a very, very short amount of time. A couple of turns, you can be right there and ready to engage in trying to take over each other's spaces, if you choose to do that. As I explained in the movement, there are ways where you can move some of your knights through. You're passing through, and that's considered like a friendly move. So you can sort of form alliances in a multiplayer game, and then later on you can turn around and turn your back on them. But there are ways that you can both occupy the same space in a peaceful way. However, if you do wish to be aggressive, you can. And one of the things that I failed to mention in the overview is that players' cities, once they're placed, another player cannot come in and try to occupy their city or destroy it. So those places that you have them on the board are permanent, and so it's going to be important and really weighing on your decisions of where you're going to expand your reign and where you are going to then build cities to further try to expand your fiefdom. So that is one of the underlying decisions that come in this game. I've played this game with all player counts, 2, 3, and 4 players, and it plays fine with 2, but I think it plays best with 4. And as the game unfolds later in the game, the decisions become even more crucial as to what you're going to do, because there is a lot of stuff that's going on the game board. Everybody has their pieces out on the board, and it's going to come down to making the best moves possible. Now, one of the things that really comes into play is being able to advance in the noble ranks by turning in these different prestige points. And you have to spend your whole turn, your action, to be able to do that. So the timing is going to be important. But this game presses you, to see if you're going to hold on to them or not. Because if you choose to hold on to too many of them, your opponents can come in and start attacking you and taking your prestige points away from you. So it's going to lend into this really cool decision making and being efficient with what you're doing on all of your turns, which I really, really like that. So it gives the game some depth to it. Now, this is from the designer who did Splendor, and this is not Splendor. This in no way is an engine building game, and but like Splendor, it is a very, very simple game in terms of mechanics. And but that doesn't mean a simple game doesn't give the game some depth, because when I explain to you the different things that are going on, there is. Now with this one, especially from a family perspective, this particular game, I consider this an essential for a family library, especially if you're just starting off, because this is a really, really good representation of an area control game, being able to go back and forth and trying to make decisions to expand, and then also to occupy and try to take over things from your opponents, especially with having the simple rules in order to play the game, and that's one of the things that makes it perfect for a family library. Secondly, the game plays in less than an hour. So you're going to you can have a 4-player game and be done in under an hour and have a fulfilling experience. So that's important as well. And then also the benefits of playing this game really comes down to how to be efficient on your turn and making decisions as to what you're going to do. Are you going to expand? Are you going to, when it comes time when you have all of your knights on the board, how many of them are you going to convert into your villages and strongholds, and taking the knights off the board? Because the more knights take off the board, you're leaving them unprotected. And so those are some things that are going to weigh into some good decisions for this game. Overall, I really, really like Barony. This is probably, right now, this is the last day of September in 2015. And right now, this is in my top 5 games for 2015. I really like it that much. Completely surprised me with this one. It was released at Gen Con, kind of came out a little bit under the radar, but definitely one that I would recommend that you add to your library. That is Barony. All right, that's it for now, and join me again next time as we take a look at another game and we see how it makes it to the table. Bye-bye.